Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by Wes Mitchell. Big recruiting weekend coming up, and we're going to take an overall sort of a general look at the Gamecock staff that's been assembled by Will Muschamps. Virtually the entire staff is in place now, Wes, although we're hearing there could be one more hire probably on the defensive side. What are you hearing at this point?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's kind of been I think fluid situation would be the best way to describe it. I think from talking to Muschamps when he's met, with me and Chris Clark there in our little two-on-one meeting type deal, and then when he met with the media last week, he had kind of identified this week that we're in right now that's coming to an end as being sort of the timetable for that hire. But right now, I'm not so sure that that's necessarily a hard and fast timetable. When I look at how many times it's kind of changed behind the scenes, I've heard multiple times, well, this guy is the front runner right now, and then you hear, a few days later that a different guy is the front runner. So it's been very, very fluid, and I think that it's one of those things where he has a number of options just in how he's going to structure it, because it looks clear from the numbers standpoint that it would be a defensive guy. They only have 3 hired, official on-the-field defensive guys right now. Then, of course, you assume Muschamps is going to help out with a position. Well, that gives you flexibility. You've got T-Rob in the secondary. You got Hutzler at linebackers, Lance Thompson at the defensive line. But how are you going to structure the rest of it? Is Muschamps going to help out with linebackers? And, maybe you bring in a secondary coach to help T-Rob, or even a defensive line coach to help out with Lance Thompson up front. A lot of teams are doing that now. They're splitting their defensive tackles and their defensive ends. Or does Muschamps help out with the secondary, and then you bring in a guy to either help out, split the linebackers or again split the defensive line. So, I think he's got a lot of flexibility in how he wants to structure it, and he's trying to make sure he can find that best fit for the completion of the staff.
So Muschamps has 8 assistants at this point, and we're hearing there could be one additional hire, a 9th hire, possibly as early as today. Wes, there are some other personnel that are part of the staff that will not necessarily be on the field, but kind of behind-the-scenes people who will certainly have an impact on Gamecock football, and I wanted to talk briefly with you about them. Clyde Rin, hired as the Director of High School Relations, and he'll be an assistant to Coach Muschamps and a person that's known across South Carolina sports. And I think Clyde Rin brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and relationships to that position, and it looks like he'll be working alongside Robbie Klaus, who's been with the program for a number of years. Robbie was promoted to Director of Player Personnel, so those two jobs kind of go hand in hand. It looks like those two will be working together.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think with Clyde Rin, you're talking about a guy that just has so many long-standing ties to the state of South Carolina. He's one of these guys that just knows everybody. So, it makes sense to put him in that position. And then you got Robbie Klaus, who, I think did an outstanding job. With the previous staff here, he sort of has, I guess, grown up in the South Carolina program. I think, taken over there, I think straight out of college, out of USC, and he was a grad assistant, and then he obviously was director of high school relations at one time under Spurrier. Then he got a promotion under Spurrier, and now for him to stay on, it just makes, I think, a lot of sense, because I think everybody around that program has seen how hard Robbie Klaus has worked, and a lot of times, I think, to be fair, Robbie Klaus has done the job that maybe you see other schools that have 3 or 4 different people to split, those duties. So I think the kind of expansion of the recruiting staff is a major positive for South Carolina. They actually hired a young lady, Jessica Jackson, who comes over as basically director of on-campus recruiting, who is going to help to, essentially just make sure everything on visits, unofficial visits, official visits, make sure everything runs smoothly. Another point of contact for players or prospects and their parents, I think, is a good move, because, when you have maybe 15 kids on an official visit and they've got mom and dad with them, maybe they have an assistant coach with them, it's a lot to manage. So, I think bringing on someone like Jessica Jackson, I've heard nothing but positive things about. I believe she comes over from Alabama's recruiting staff, if I'm correct. And, I think that just makes all the sense in the world because, you look around, man, the stuff that and some Gamecock fans don't want to hear about Clemson, but you have to compare yourself to your rivals and to your neighbors because you're recruiting the same kids. So, you look at what Clemson's done in-house as far as their recruiting department goes. You look at, in Alabama. And I'm sure Georgia's going to upgrade their staff as well with Kirby Smart coming on. He's not going to learn for a decade under Nick Saban and then not copy many of his, processes. So it was much needed, if you ask me, and I think it will certainly pay off for South Carolina.
All right, Jeff Dillman also coming over from Alabama. He worked there this past year as the strength coach. He'll serve in the same capacity for Gamecock football, and Dillman worked previously with Muschamps at the University of Florida. And Ellis Johnson is part of the athletic department now. Wes, he will not be on the field. He'll be an off-the-field assistant for Coach Muschamps, and we assume he's going to work with the defense. Ellis Johnson, been around the college game a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, frankly, it made no sense to me why you wouldn't have put Ellis Johnson in some type of role last season. You talk about, again, knowledge of the state, like we were talking about with Clyde Rin, connections in the state. And, you, of course, talk about the experience and the football knowledge that Ellis Johnson brings. I think to have that extra set of eyes, when you're scouting an opponent and when you're self-scouting, I think, finding trends that teams are going to use against you is just as important as scouting the other team. That's every time we've been in, just a very oversimplified example. Every time we've been in 3rd and 8 on defense, this is how we've reacted, or we're running this play on offense pretty much every time we get in this situation. We're being too predictable. Having another set of eyes who understands the game and understands what an opponent is looking at when they look at your tape, I think is something that could be instrumental for South Carolina. And I don't know if you could find a better person than Ellis Johnson for that role. And then even though he's not going to be on or off campus recruiting guys, he's not going to be going to high schools. If you look at the connections Ellis has specifically to Rock Hill and the job he's done there, recruiting guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Stephon Gilmore, just having him back in the fold absolutely pays dividends, in certain pockets of the state.
Ellis Johnson, the Winsboro, South Carolina native, back with Gamecock football. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell here on Gamecock Central Radio. We invite you to download the free phone apps that allow you to listen to Gamecock Central Radio on your phone. We've got an iPhone app and an Android app, and we're also on iTunes. Simply search Gamecock Central Radio for all three. Wes, offensively, we've got Kurt Roper and Brian McClendon, co-offensive coordinators, but it looks like Roper will be in charge of the offense with help from McClendon. Sean Elliott retained as the offensive line coach. Bobby Bentley, the running backs coach, and Pat Washington, veteran SEC coach, will handle tight ends for the Gamecocks. How much do we know at this point, Wes, what Roper's going to do with this offense and what this new staff is going to do?
I think it's going to be a pretty exciting offense to watch. I really do. From everything I've gathered, it's obviously going to be spread. There's going to be some up-tempo stuff. And one thing I've picked up on a lot is that Muschamps really likes some of the things he picked up on when he was at Auburn for this last year with Gus Malzahn offensively. You bring in a Bobby Bentley, who I think we've all seen his offensive mind at play at the high school level. Well, Bentley was working with the running backs, even though he didn't have an on-field role. He was working with the running backs at Auburn, directly with those guys. So I think that's a clue for us from what I've heard. I think you look at what Roper has done, in his past. You look at some of those Duke offenses that were, actually really good, especially for Duke. Broke some of their offensive records. I believe some of them set by Steve Spurrier back in the day as a coach. So, I think it's going to be spread. There's going to be some tempo, but I think some of the running game will actually look similar to some of the stuff that Malzahn has done at Auburn, which I think is pretty exciting if you're a fan. That's something that Auburn, when they've been good enough up front, when they've had the offensive line to do what they want to do. Their running game has been very, very good. So, the year that they went to the national title under Gus Malzahn, they just gashed people with the run. So, that's a good scheme of things. I think that if you're a South Carolina fan, maybe you had this idea of Muschamps, well, he's a defensive-minded guy. Obviously, that's true, but I think he realized from his time at Florida that you can't just play defense and get in the I formation and, run the football anymore. You've got to try to be dynamic on offense. You've got to make big plays. You've got to put your playmakers in space. And if you really want to get deep with it, you're not going to have playmakers if you don't run an exciting offense. Like, these kids these days don't want to play, in the 1995, I formation, pound the football offense. They want to be put in space. They want to have opportunities to make plays. So, I think Muschamps got the right idea of it.
Wes, National Signing Day is coming up on February 3rd. That's a Wednesday, and the next 3 weekends will be critical for Gamecock football recruiting. Official visits will be taken here in the next 3 weekends. So talk about what the schedule will be like, who all is coming in for South Carolina football.
Well, a big recruiting weekend starts today as we're recording this. We're recording this on a Friday. This weekend is the first official kind of open date for officials since the dead period ended. And if you're a listener out there, whether you're a subscriber or not, we actually have the full list as far as we know, of known visitors on our front page right now on Gamecock Central. But and if you are a subscriber, then we actually have the behind the scenes on each of those guys that is visiting, kind of the latest scoop. But some guys to watch. I think the name target right now is Sam Bruce, who is a Fort Lauderdale, Florida kid, St. Thomas, that is committed to Miami. And I was just talking about dynamic guys, playmakers, guys you put in space. He is that. He is the definition of that. With Sam Bruce, think Ace Sanders, Bruce Ellington type guy. Not the biggest, but dynamic with the ball in his hands. I think that's the easiest way to think of Sam Bruce as a player. A local kid everybody's familiar with, T.J. Brunson from right down the road. I think Richmond Northeast is probably, Emerson, like 15 minutes from USC.
That's right.
So right down the road, a guy that people are familiar with. And Marlon Character, interesting recruitment there. He's a 4-star safety from Atlanta. He was committed to South Carolina's previous staff at one time. Then he decommitted and committed to Auburn, obviously to Will Muschamps and Travaris Robinson. So now he is taking another look at South Carolina with his official visit this weekend. He's still committed to Auburn, but you'd have to think with T-Rob and Muschamps now in Columbia that South Carolina has a pretty good shot to get him. There's a number of other guys on this list. I think we're probably going to bore people if I go into details on all of them. But Evan Henson, a big-time athlete from Florida that was one time committed to Miami. He's kind of a tight. He's listed as an athlete, but he's kind of a tight end type. Tyreek Martin, a defensive end from Alabama. Daniel Thomas, a safety from Alabama, and a kid whose name, if you're a casual recruiting follower, though, I'll give you another name that I think you need to get to know out there, is Keel Pollard. And this kid is from Moultrie, Georgia, Colquitt County High School. He is a high 3-star guy committed to Arkansas right now in our recruiting rankings. But Emerson, I think this is a 4-star guy. I think he probably moves up in our next rankings. And South Carolina's recruiting him as a wide receiver. And I think if this weekend goes well, then South Carolina could get good news there. And I hate to invoke this name on the kid because it's high expectations, but he has a certain Pharaoh Cooper type quality to him. So I think that's actually at the same time in their careers a fair comparison. So when you look at what South Carolina's trying to build on offense, getting this kid would be a big step for them.
Wes, the Gamecocks have got commitments from several four-star prospects, headlined, of course, by quarterback Brandon McElwain out of Pennsylvania and also wide receiver Brian Edwards out of Conway. But it looks by and large right now that the Gamecock staff is focusing on a lot of in-state kids, local kids from the greater South Carolina area, and a lot of those right now seem to be three-star prospects that Muschamps and the staff are trying to find a few diamonds in the rough. Just because a kid's rated a 3-star doesn't mean he shouldn't have been a 4 or 5, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to find that out. So talk about Muschamps' strategy right now as we near signing day. We're getting down to brass tacks here for the 2016 signing class.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, important for people to remember, a 3-star prospect, I think for some reason people get in their head that a 3-star prospect is not a good prospect. Well, that's not the case. A lot of times, a 3-star prospect is going to be a guy that has obviously some knock against his game. Some 3-stars are excellent athletes, but are just very raw, and they're going to have to be coached up, so to speak. They're going to have to be developed, maybe more so than another kid. Other 3-star kids, it's kind of the opposite. It's the fact that they have a low or they have a high floor and a low ceiling, which is meaning basically they're probably not a bust, but do they have as much potential as another guy? Maybe they're already close to fulfilling their potential. So, 3-star guys a lot of times have to be the backbone of your program. I think you need guys that are going to work hard, that are going to do things the right way, and then you have to, in my opinion, build outward. You have to have a foundation, but then you need to find 4-star, 5-star playmakers to go along with this basis of talent. So I think the most important thing with these quote 3-star guys is you've got to evaluate and you've got to develop. All 3-stars are not created equal. There's hundreds of 3-star prospects in every single class that are going to be really, really good college football players. And there are hundreds of 3-star guys in every class that are going to not ever pan out as college football players. So your goal as a coaching staff is to pick the right ones, the guys that you can get in and develop and that have the potential to develop.
That's right.
I think when it comes to defensive guys, it's really hard to go against a Will Muschamps. Nobody's going to bat 100%. Honestly, if you're batting 50% on guys out of high school, you're actually hitting you're hitting at a good percentage. But when it comes to defensive guys, if you see 3-star come across and it's Will Muschamps' name beside him, you have to feel good that they've been well evaluated.
Right, Wes, the rating system, we've talked about this before. It's an inexact science, and you take it with a grain of salt. I'll give you a perfect example. Hunter Renfro at Clemson was a 2-star prospect, and he caught 2 touchdown passes in the national championship game on Monday night of this week. So the rating system not always accurate. I think Renfro had offers from Coastal Carolina and Charleston Southern, and he chose to walk on at Clemson. So there's talent out there, Wes. You mentioned you got to have a staff that can identify these guys that can play that might be 3-stars or even 2-stars, and you got to have a staff that can recognize them, identify them, and then go get them.
If you sign 4 and 5-star guys, an entire class of 4 and 5-star guys, and then another school signs an entire class of 2 and 3-star guys, over time, that school that signed the 4 and 5-star guys is probably going to have more talent than the one that signed the 2 and 3-star guys. But on an individual basis, there's always going to be 5-stars that bust, and there's always going to be 2-stars that come out of nowhere and catch 2 touchdowns in the national title game. So it is inexact. And like Muschamps pointed out, you don't have unlimited access to high school prospects. You're evaluating literally thousands of guys every year. The NFL process, they have unlimited access to these kids before they get to the NFL draft. They have psych evaluations. They have the Wonderlic test. They have doctors, poking and prodding. And they still miss on half of their first-round picks. So, that to me tells you how much of an inexact science it really is.
That's right, and that's why you got to have a good coaching staff. Wes, just over 3 weeks until National Signing Day, and I imagine that's going to keep you pretty busy.
I would say yes.
All right, well, we look forward to getting more recruiting information from you very soon here on Gamecock Central Radio. A reminder, you can get breaking Gamecock news alerts delivered to your email inbox. Just text USC to 42828. Text USC to 42828 or go to Gamecock Central's homepage for more information. Wes, thanks as always for your time and your insight.
Sounds good, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, he's Wes Mitchell, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Have a great weekend.